Okay, let's talk about the pop-up triggers. So I'm going to go into the alerts manager, head over to Site Popups, and I'll create a brand new pop-up actually. And so what I want to do is head over to configure and talk about Site Popup Trigger. So by default, pop-ups are set to appear on page load. So when the page loads up, all the elements have rendered into the screen, and everything is has settled, then the pop-up will appear. That's what this page load does. I'm going to set this to sticky and set this to never end just so there's no discrepancies. And so, yes, the page load trigger will actually load the pop-up on page load. Go figure. So this site pop-up trigger is unique to the pop-up display type. It won't work with banner. Um, and for obvious reasons, I suggest you watch the banner pop-ups episodes to kind of get more insight on that. But for now, let's talk about the pop-up triggers. So there's page load. There's also click. So with click, we're able to actually establish that we want this pop-up to display whenever the user clicks on something. And we can define that something in this selector field here. If you're not familiar with selectors and how they work, get in touch with the tech. We can show you how they work, or just you can YouTube just CSS selectors, and it's all pretty easy to work with, pretty easy to understand. The tricky part is realistically getting it into your content, but we'll go over that in a little bit. So we have the same setting but on hover. So whenever the user hovers over an element, this pop-up will appear. And lastly is scroll. So in scroll, whenever the user scrolls on the page, then this pop-up will appear, and we can define how far down the page we want them to scroll before this appears. So this is set to 50 by default, which just means that when half the page has been scrolled, the pop-up will appear. We can increase this though to like 75. So whenever they scroll through 3/4 of the page, then this pop-up will appear. So I'm going to show you an example with the click option. And what I'm going to do is I have the R mission page opened up, and I have a button here that says click me. It's set to on hover, so whenever I hover over that, it appears. That's cool. So I'm going to set this click me link. This is a link, so I just created a link. I said click me, made this a link. And over in the advanced tab, oh, I'm going to set this to a pound sign, but over in the advanced tab, we have style sheet classes and ID. These are the two that we're going to use for that click and hover. I'm going to set the class to be click btn for click button. So I'll just copy that, hit OK and save. And so in my pop-up selector field now, I'm going to place that in there. But if you're not sure how selectors work, we have this little info tab here. Come on, there we go. Um, yeah, we have this little info tab, or you can contact a tech here, that's fine. So it just gives you a little bit more info on about how selectors work. So you can target any element on your site. So if you create your own button, or if you have a table, or if you create a block, there's ways to create blocks in that editor also. You can also target things inside widgets as well. Um, but that's a bit more advanced, and we'll talk about that probably later. So it tells you use a dot for any class and a pound sign for any ID. Um, so if we don't, it's going to look for the exact element. So I can type in here a P, and that'll target any paragraph element that I create, or a body, for example. The body is the entire screen of the website. And that's what that's telling you there is this will target the whole page. So whenever I click anywhere in the page or hover anywhere in the page, it'll load up that pop-up. There's also some more examples there. So it says h1.myHeader will target any heading 1 element with the class myHeader. So what that looks like is I'm going to open up our mission again, and I'm going to create a heading 1. This is a heading 1. And if I take a look at the source, here's my H1 here. And so if I were to edit this and say class equals my header, then this H1 now has that my header class, and it actually suits that h1.myHeader there. So just a little bit of HTML CSS for you. And then there's things like the very last option there, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. So that will target any heading. So in that case, you can just delete this, and we can start typing in like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Oops. Okay, and this is a heading 3. This is a heading 2. This is a heading 1. So any of these options, when clicked, will display that pop-up. All right, so just kind of keeping in with the syntax of selectors, since I added, let me remove these. Since I added that click BTN as a class, this is a class, then I want to put a dot at the front of this, dot BTN. Okay, if I use the ID field, then I would just put a pound sign, but we're going to use a dot because it's a class. So I'm going to go ahead and save this pop-up now. And then on the our mission page, I'll actually just refresh. So I have a link, and since I set it to the pound sign, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything when I click it. However, since it has that class, when I click it, it's actually going to pop the pop-up for me. So some pretty handy stuff going on there. Um, and if you're familiar with web development or how that particular advanced tab works, we could do some pretty cool stuff with this. I can actually make this look like a button. Like I can say padding 6px, border solid 1px, and I'll say uh, black, and I'll say that's about fine actually. That's probably good enough to make it look like a button. And let's save. Okay, so it's not a great button, but it's a button nonetheless. And if I give that a click, it loads up the pop-up. All right, so that's how the click trigger works. The hover is the same way. I'm going to change this to hover btn. And then in the editor for our mission, come on, edit, there we go. I'll just say hover over me, and I'll change this to hover btn. We'll save that. All right, that looks more like a button. I think that click BTN had some sort of styles applied to it that made it look that way. But that looks more like a button to me. And when I hover over it, oh, I have to save my pop-up. There we go. Let's give this a refresh again. And there we go. So when I give this a hover, there we go. And that happens every time we hover as well. So if we're going to use the body option, like this was, body, and hover, well, that's a little bit dangerous because every time we hover over the body, which is the entire page, then it's going to display that pop-up, which makes navigating the website very difficult. So let's set this back to scroll, and I'll keep it at 50, and I'll save the pop-up. And then I'll head to the home page. I don't know that this works with our mission because there is no scrolling here. Notice I'm doing my scroll, my mouse, and it's not doing anything. So let's head to the home page where there is some scroll. And I'll wait for this to load up. Okay, so as soon as the scroll bar goes over half of the page, about this halfway point here, we should be able to get that pop-up. There we go. So I've just scrolled down to about halfway through the page, and now I get the pop-up. And yeah, it's every time. So every time moving forward, you notice I moved backward and I didn't get it. Okay, very cool. So those are our pop-up triggers. It's a little bit complicated with click and hover. But if you do like the idea of the click and hover triggers, but you don't quite understand it, go ahead and get in touch with the tech here and we can help you set that up. So that's it for this video. In the next video, I'll go over the pop-up closed. See you then.